Welcome back to Watch the Bookerman and to Impact Wrestling Lockdown 2012, a show which I think is arguably the most significant in the series so far, 2.5 years in, but I think that this may well top even Bound for Glory 10-10-10 in terms of the impact that the fallout of this show will have on the rest of the series as we continue to build to what is currently scheduled to be the last show in the series, Slammiversary 2012. It's not just this fantastic card that we've put together for the show, but also a surprise which takes place on this night, which I think that nobody's going to want to miss. I could try and hype it up even more, but I'm just really looking forward to getting it out there. So let's go into Impact Wrestling Lockdown 2012. And we begin with a video package, the usual really for a lockdown. We're putting over as much as the matches. We've got Punk Hardy 2, we've got Joe and Angle, we've got the opener, which I'll get into very, very shortly. But it's also about the structure. Every match taking place inside these 6 sides of steel. Something that I've not always been sure about. I did actually very, very early on in the save question whether I should just do lockdown as main events in the steel cage and maybe having the lethal lockdown as well. But I did in the end decide to keep it. So of course while we're looking at the build to Punk and Hardy and Joe and Angle, which I'll get into when I'm actually talking about those matches themselves. After the commentators introduce the show, we see that in this sold out building there are 2 empty seats in the front row, one for Paul Heyman and the other for his +1. That's of course going to be a story that develops throughout the night, but Mauro, Mike and Taz are at this time more interested in how this show opens with the lethal lockdown, the New Age Originals plus AJ Styles versus the New Age of Honor, and it is AJ Styles and Eddie Edwards who start. Remember, they were the main event of this week's Impact Wrestling and they go into it again. But as Steve Corino defeated Jimmy Jacobs on that same show, it is the New Age of Honor who have that man advantage, and it is Davey Richards who comes out. So good strategy from the New Age of Honor there. They take control until Tyler Black joins AJ Styles. He was the man who reached out the olive branch to AJ Styles, we come to understand, and that unlikely alliance goes well. Brodie Lee enters next, then Chris Hero, then Austin Aries, Jimmy Jacobs, Steve Corino, and then Claudio Castagnoli is out last because we want to give him the opportunity to clean house. He's so good at that sequence of moves and just taking many, many people out at once, so we want to give him that shine. It follows the very formulaic nature of these War Games, lethal lockdown type matches. The heels take control until a face comes out and then they get the man advantage again. So it's that kind of back and forth, but eventually we do see the match breaks down, and it's something that I don't like to do, but something that I think you have to do to be able to get some of the good spots in. But we do have in the opening match that we break out of the cage. Now to me, when you have one Hell in a Cell or one steel cage match on a show, the entire point of the match is to keep the people in or to keep people out. But I think because every match is inside a steel cage, I think it'd be boring if every single match was just contained to the 6 sides. Despite it sounding quite contradictory, I think that on a show like this you do need a couple of matches where you are using the outside as well as the inside of the ring. That's how I'll justify it to myself anyway, because I want there to be a couple of big spots in the match. One, I want to see Claudio Castagnoli do a big swing to Eddie Edwards on the top of the steel cage. I think we saw that in reality in a Blood and Guts match. And I also want Brodie Lee and AJ Styles to fight up the top there, and Brodie Lee to throw AJ Styles from the cage into a pile of bodies on the outside. That's a spot that I think we have seen AJ Styles do before. So those are our 2 big spots, one being a stunt bump for AJ Styles. After everybody sort of cancelled each other out, Tyler Black and Jimmy Jacobs, Austin Aries and Steve Corino. So it's kind of the leaders of these groups and the top wrestler in these groups is what it comes down to. AJ Styles, however, who has taken that dive, does eventually come back and is able to take Austin Aries out of contention. We then have Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black left to deal with Steve Corino. Tyler holds Steve Corino in place as Jacobs produces that spike that was the start of this whole storyline that has been used to blind Tyler Black, and it is giving it back now to Steve Corino, who is jabbed in the eye with that spike before Tyler Black can hit him with the black out stomp. Tyler Black pinning Steve Corino for the 1-2-3, and it is the New Age Originals plus AJ Styles who win this match. Brodie Lee by far the weak link, but a few people struggling, I think possibly with the nature of this match. I did book it as a storytelling match because of how long it was. We couldn't use Mayhem or Wild Brawl, but it is an overbooked match, a crazy match that actually does, if you look at the individual ratings, limit pretty much everybody in it. They all, apart from AJ Styles, usually get better than this in just normal singles matches, but I don't mind about that because I think it would have been a fantastic, chaotic way to open this show. And after the match, Tyler Black and Jimmy Jacobs, of course, standing tall, a cathartic moment for them, overcoming Steve Corino. I should have popped Jimmy Jacobs' face turn in here, but I'll have to do that on the next show. AJ Styles joins the bloodied and battered Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black, stumbling and staggering himself. He's been through so much during this match, just as all 10 competitors have been. A brutal, lethal lockdown. AJ Styles holds his rib, gives a nod of recognition to Tyler Black, which is reciprocated, but we're also putting across that there is no blossoming friendship here between AJ Styles and the New Age Originals. They have been diametrically opposed for the entirety of the New Age's run. We're not going to say that things are all hunky-dory now. Styles then leads these 6 sides of steel, heading up the ramp as the commentators speculate whether we have just seen the end of the long and brutal war between the 2 sides of the New Age, the Originals on this occasion coming out on top. We then get an interview with Desmond Wolfe ahead of his World Tag Team Championship title defense up next, and Wolfe confirms to Jeremy Borash that he returned from the United Kingdom to the United States late last night, but says that there will be no excuses for him tonight because he simply doesn't need any. Wolfe confirms that he hasn't spoken to Bryan Danielson since the incident after their successful title defense at Destination X, but frankly, he doesn't think it matters. He's never liked Bryan, and Bryan has never liked him, but when they're in the ring together, before he can finish that thought, Bryan Danielson storms onto the set, proving the point that these 2 men are simply chalk and cheese. He tells Wolfe to shut his mouth, focus on the match up next. They've got a title to defend. Desmond Wolfe kind of shrugs this off. He doesn't care and heads off, because that is our second match of the night, the Impact World Tag Team Championships match. And it's a back and forth match. Of course, Danielson and Wolfe not as cohesive as the Motor City Machine Guns, but they are just that good as a team that they do overcome Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin. The only sort of caveat at the end of this match is that Danielson appears to be setting up for the running knee strike to take out Alex Shelley when Wolfe grabs him, pushes him out of the way, and hits a jawbreaker lariat as Alex Shelley returns to his feet. Wolfe is then the one who gets the pin on Alex Shelley, and it's a little bit of a snide move, but I think the way things have gone in the last month, Wolfe is justified to try and sort of get under the skin of Bryan Danielson. It's a good rated match, but actually when you look at the individual ratings, it is even better. 85 from Shelley, 81 from Sabin, 83 from Wolfe, 94 from Bryan Danielson, and that's what the Impact Wrestling Tag Team division can do. Having taken the victory off the plate of Bryan Danielson, Desmond Wolfe is the first to receive the Impact World Tag Team Championships from the referee, and he takes both titles. When he hands the other belt to an already annoyed Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon snaps in his face, angered by the actions that took place at the end of the match. Wolfe has a smug look on his face and simply raises 2 fingers in the face of his tag team partner. He's not rising to this. He doesn't care. As far as he's concerned, it's a successful night for Danielson and Wolfe. Wolfe turns to leave, but Bryan grabs him, the 2 briefly going face to face, with Wolfe telling Bryan to simmer down. This obviously gets further under the skin of Bryan Danielson, but he does this time allow Wolfe to leave. Despite their dysfunction as a team, the commentators put over that these 2 men have some of the best natural chemistry that they've ever seen from a tag team, and as long as that's the case, despite their personal differences, they're going to be a formidable force in the Impact Wrestling Tag Team division. Switching focus from one tag team match to another that arguably has equally high stakes, Beer Money are interviewed by Jeremy Borash and talk about how tonight could be their final night working together as a team. James Storm acknowledges that maybe his emotions got the better of him when he accepted the challenge on Thursday, but he couldn't pass up the opportunity to get his hands on the Briscoes inside the 6 sides of steel. Robert Roode is perhaps in a more reflective mood, saying that he hopes that they've made the right call because tonight could be the end of Beer Money. They have lost to the Briscoes before. He knows that Jay and Mike will do anything to win. Their only option now is to fight for the future of their team and for revenge on the Briscoes. We then go into the third match of the night, the Impact Knockouts Championship match. This basically goes how every other title defense for Gail Kim has gone so far, a back and forth match. It's a good match, no doubt about that, but when Gail Kim hits the Eat Defeat, the referee counts for the 1, 2, but this time Hamada kicks out. Nobody has kicked out of that move since Gail Kim came back to Impact Wrestling, and the match continues. Hamada heavily selling the injury to her throat for the rest of the match. This then plays into the finish, as when Gail Kim looks to be stalking Hamada, ready to hit a second defeat, Hamada has her hand on her throat but turns round and sprays the mist into the eyes of Gail Kim, blinding the Impact Knockouts champion before hitting her with a Hamada driver in the middle of the ring. There is no extra moves after that. There is no showing off. She simply counts the 1, 2, 3, and we have a new Impact Knockouts champion. The 4-month build of Hamada since her heel turn comes to the end as she becomes the new Knockouts champion. The first defeat of Gail Kim since she came back to Impact Wrestling at Bound for Glory 2011, and a medic is allowed to run into the cage to check on Gail Kim, who has been blinded by our new Knockouts champion. She has gone to the darkest depths imaginable to take down the former champion, but that is what it took to defeat Gail Kim, who has been brilliant, arguably the greatest knockout in the history of the division. But now Hamada stands tall, no Larry Sweeney, she stands alone as the Impact Knockouts champion. A big title change on a very, very important show, as we are sent to the back. A very busy Jeremy Borash seen in the parking lot, because Paul Heyman has just arrived at the building. Jeremy Borash approaches him and asks where his guest is. Has he arrived yet? What's going on? Paul Heyman tells Jeremy Borash that there's been a slight delay. There's a few details that need to be sorted out, so his guest is going to be making his own way to the building tonight. He tells Jeremy Borash not to worry about it. However, he's sure that I's will be dotted, T's will be crossed, and everything will be smoothed over in time for his guest to appear on tonight's show. So while we lose heat to the storyline, I'm not worried, because there are still segments that I think will bring the Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe storyline back up in time for that. We then get the entrances for the 4th match of the night, but Beer Money are attacked from behind by the Briscoes. They are absolutely determined for tonight to be the end of James Storm and Robert Roode as a team, and Beer Money are caught completely off guard, beaten down around the ringside area, thrown into the steel steps, into the side of the steel cage, and this is before the bell even rings. Bear in mind, referees are eventually able to coax the Briscoes into the ring, more because they're happy with the damage that they've done rather than them having any sort of change of heart. They may have already done enough. Essentially, it could be a case of we get in the ring, we ring the bell, and it's basically academic for the Briscoes. However, that's never going to be the case. Beer Money fight for their careers as we go into the 4th match of the night, and it's a wild brawl, a really, really good match actually. An 82, I'm delighted with that. I mentioned previously, as we've tried to build the Briscoes up, they weren't quite getting the ratings that we hoped from them, and we knew that it would be a sort of long-term thing to build them up to being one of the top tag teams in the division. Matt Briscoe's only getting a 65, but Jay Briscoe right up there with a 79, and if they can pull out 82 matches, albeit against one of the best tag teams in the world, then I'm going to have no complaints about that. The story of the match is basically that the Briscoes are very, very much in control, and there are probably 3 or 4 occasions where we think this is it for Beer Money, but the babyfaces valiantly overcome. Robert Roode saving James Storm at 2.999, so it would have been Storm who agreed to the stipulation. It would have been his fault if they'd have lost tonight, but it wasn't to be the case, and Robert Roode hits a Fisherman's Buster, a singles finisher, as he pins Mark Briscoe. It says DWI there, but we want it to be Robert Roode getting the pin on his own. Robert Roode does help James Storm back to his feet after the match. They've survived a wild brawl with the Briscoes and retain their right to compete as a tag team in Impact Wrestling, making their way out from the back. Christopher Daniels and Frankie Kazarian join Beer Money, handing a much needed bottle of beer to each of the 2 men. Despite the Briscoes' violent dominance of the group recently, tonight is a chance to celebrate for fortune, but you could argue that the overwhelming emotion will be relief. Things could have gone very, very differently, and it was a split second between Beer Money no longer existing and them getting this much needed cathartic victory. We then get the X Division title match. This is another big match on the night. Charlie Haas has been absolutely dominant since his heel turn on Shelton Benjamin. Apart from that one embarrassing slip up where he lost to Shelton in 2 minutes, but he has been determined to prove that he is, as he's dubbed himself, wrestling's greatest. And while the undefeated El Generico, the best record of anybody in Impact Wrestling in 2012. More matches, more wins. He is the workhorse of this company and the workhorse of the X division. But despite a valiant attempt at defending his title, Charlie Haas can use the cage as a weapon and absolutely, we say dominates. There's obviously hope spots for El Generico, comebacks and things like that, but essentially Charlie Haas throws him around the ring, suplexes and into the cage. We want this to be a very brutal and dominant display from Charlie Haas as we continue his push, which makes it even more frustrating that he seems off his game and only gets a 58, but we're plodding on with this even though it doesn't seem to be connecting, as Charlie Haas defeats El Generico in 10 minutes and 3 seconds by submission with the Haas of Pain. Generico, of course, not one to ever give up, but the beating that he takes during this match is simply too much, and we see a second title change on the night. Hats off to El Generico. He's been a brilliant X Division champion since defeating Kevin Steen for it back at the end of 2011, but Charlie Haas is handed the X Division champion. Not your usual high flyer, but somebody who I think fits in with this division. So strong, so technically proficient, and I think that when you look at him against some of the other X Division athletes, he's going to look like a monster in there. We've seen it with like Shelton Benjamin coming into AEW, that he's an average looking guy in WWE, but you put him in a AEW ring and he looks like an absolute monster. I think the same can be said for Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, to be fair, in TNA at this time, and I think that's really what we want to put over in this victory, that he just was too much for El Generico. Jim Cornette leads the commentary position. He was there during the match, putting over Charlie Haas, burying El Generico, and he is delighted, a big, huge smile on his face. Colt Cabana does come out to try to check on his friend El Generico, but Haas refuses to allow him to enter the 6 sides of steel. Vicious and intense. Wrestling's Greatest is put over on commentary, saying that whether you like how he's got here or not, there's no doubting that since that turn at Against All Odds, Charlie Haas has backed up every single word that he has said, and he now, for the first time in Impact Wrestling, just 2 months after dropping his partner, holds championship gold, so you can't argue with his results. We then go into the Impact Knockouts Tag Team Championship match, and this is maybe a match that falls victim of such a packed card because it lasts less than 5 minutes, but as the bell rings, the reason for this comes clear. We start with a brawl between Awesome Kong and Sara Del Rey on one side and Rosita and Alissa Flash on the other, but Alissa Flash pulls some handcuffs from her boot and knocks out Rosita, one shot taking her down. She then turns attention to Awesome Kong and hits her, with Sara Del Rey also pulling some handcuffs out of her boot. The two beat down Awesome Kong, who does fight back. Two women with handcuffs on their fists, you're basically going to end up in one situation. They then lock Awesome Kong to the cage walls. She's there like a captured animal. She's fighting and trying to kick away and trying to tear herself away from the steel cage, but as strong as this woman is, she's not going to be escaping the handcuffs. Rosita is then passed between Alissa Flash and Sara Del Rey, slapped and punched, and basically it takes 5 minutes. They probably could have done it in 3, but eventually getting revenge for the shock defeat on Impact Wrestling this past Thursday, Alissa Flash locks an inverted cloverleaf for Rosita. I think that actually, after just having a submission in the previous match where we changed the title, I'd say a Flash driver and a 1, 2, 3. We have new Impact Knockouts Tag Team titles. Now, this is very heelish from Alissa Flash and Sara Del Rey, there's no question about that. We have added that to their character in recent weeks, or since they became a team really. They're not afraid, whether you like them or not, to go for the low road, and I think that despite Awesome Kong and Rosita having their odd couple run as the tag team champions, it was time to put the titles on Alissa Flash and Sara Del Rey, who both put in very, very good performances, and I felt that this was a way to keep Awesome Kong strong in defeat. It's not a good match because it was so short and because of the booking itself. We do cool the crowd a little, but with 2 huge matches still in store, I don't think that's too much of an issue. After the match, Alissa Flash and Sara Del Rey leave the ring celebrating on the ramp, and despite what is a huge win for them, the story is sort of on Awesome Kong, who is growing increasingly angry, trying in vain to release herself. Rosita eventually returns to her feet and tries to release Awesome Kong, but struggles without the key. She's never going to get her free either. As the situation continues, we see the rage is building up and building up and building up for the former Impact Knockouts Tag Team Champion. Eventually, some crew members are able to cut her free from the cage, but for their troubles, they get elbowed and pushed and taken down by the monster. Rosita, seeing this, puts her hand on the shoulder of Awesome Kong, looking to calm her down, but herself just gets thrown across the ring by Awesome Kong. Hopefully some good ragdoll selling from Rosita there, as Kong stands furiously, her eyes bulging out of her head, locked on Rosita, who is absolutely terrified to see the rage of her partner finally turn towards her. She has stood beside her for months and months now as partners, but now the championships are gone, and after being put in that understandably frustrating situation, Awesome Kong appears to have snapped and pushed over her partner Rosita. As we then go to the commentators, who recap 3 huge title changes on tonight's show and introduce us to the video package that looks at the build for Kurt Angle's return match against Samoa Joe, beginning from the moment Kurt Angle became Impact Wrestling's matchmaker at the very beginning of 2012, leading the charge alongside CM Punk. Samoa Joe looked to antagonise and get under the skin of Kurt Angle from day one, knowing that the man who we then thought had retired would be unable to fight back given his new role. Things changed after Kurt Angle was choked out by Samoa Joe Against All Odds. He decided that there was no way that he couldn't fight to get cleared again. Kurt Angle was cleared and revealed to Samoa Joe, who'd been serving a suspension, that they would face each other at Lockdown. So again, bringing 4 months of build together once more. Throughout the story, Paul Heyman has injected himself in, teasing this important VIP guest. It's been more towards Kurt Angle, but we have basically put over that he will be front row for Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe. However, as we return to ringside, the 2 seats reserved for Heyman and his guest remain empty. Eventually, Paul Heyman walks out and takes a seat, but there is no sign of his guest, who Heyman did tell us was delayed earlier. The commentators are growing sceptical about what Paul Heyman has promised us in the build-up to Lockdown to what he's going to deliver, because up until now, and bearing in mind he was supposed to be there for Angle versus Joe, there is no sign of this apparent special guest. It's a good segment going into what I'm hoping it's Kurt Angle. What a 99 rating from Kurt Angle, a 90 from Joe's fantastic, but you know, we've voluntarily put Kurt Angle on the sideline for 6 months for storyline purposes. There's nothing you can say really, is there? A 93 overall. We kind of know what to expect from these two at this point. A fantastic back and forth match. It goes 16 minutes, so not as long as maybe some of the other big epic matches that we've put on previously, but I sent them out there to steal the show tonight. And if we didn't have a World Championship match, I would have put this as the main event because I knew it was going to be the best match. A brutal back and forth fight, so much anger, so much emotion. This is 6 months for Kurt Angle. He thought that he had lost the right to do the thing that he loved for the rest of his life. He's got that back, and he's shown that he has no intention of losing it again. Superb wrestling, great heat. What more can you say? Kurt Angle pinning Samoa Joe, following an angle slam, perhaps from the second rope. I don't know. I could have put in a stump bump for Kurt Angle here, actually. We know he likes to do a moonsault off the cage and things like that, but perhaps that would be too much too soon for his first match in 6 months. Obviously, in reality, when he took some time out of the ring, he really did struggle, but that was a few years down the line. So I'm hoping that in 2012, it's feasible that even after 6 months, Kurt Angle can put in a 99 performance. Absolutely ridiculous. Throughout this entire save, Kurt Angle has just carried us, hasn't he? Having gone all out in an intense back and forth match, Kurt Angle has his arm raised, of course selling the effects of that match, his first in 6 months. He has proved, though, beyond doubt, that he still has what it takes to compete at the very, very top of the Impact Wrestling roster. After the sort of dust settles, Kurt Angle leaves the ring and gets in the face of Paul Heyman, annoyed at his attempts to overshadow the match in the build of it. For what? For nothing. There is still no sign of this so-called guest that Paul Heyman was bringing with him. Heyman is nonchalant about the whole situation, shrugging and saying there's been a change of plan. Kurt Angle is further annoyed by this as Paul Heyman leaves the 2 reserved seats. There's now nobody there again as the commentators echo the confusion of everybody basically. Paul Heyman's been talking about this all month. He was saying that this person was going to have a front row seat for Kurt Angle v Samoa Joe, but for now there is no sign of Paul Heyman's guest on the show that he was promised to appear on. We do unfortunately lose heat to the storyline there, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. Kurt Angle doing well without a script, but it is limited in the rating that it can get. We then go into the discussion of what just went down before we lead into the main event. And this is, again, a good match, but I don't think it was ever going to match up to the previous contest. And Jeff Hardy, I've made him world champion for a reason that I'm hoping will become clear eventually, but he just doesn't have the stamina to carry pay-per-views. I'm hoping that it's not going to be too much of an issue for the rest of his reign, but not going to say any more than that. Jeff Hardy and CM Punk, as we know, have great chemistry, so it's still a very good match. CM Punk carrying Jeff Hardy, has to be said. A superb match that unfortunately does get a little bit messy. It's a main event of one of our big pay-per-view, so I can see why some people might be disappointed with how this goes. During the match, we get CM Punk feigning an injury. The referee's asking him if he wants to compete. He's saying he does, but he just needs some medical help. So this is where we end up with the cage door becoming undone and a medical team coming in. Sting, as the gatekeeper, reluctantly lets them in, but as we get some cold spray on CM Punk's leg, he grabs it from the medic. He was feigning, of course, and sprays it in the eyes of Jeff Hardy. It looks like he's now going to cheat to take the victory, but Sting opens the gate and comes in. He goes face to face with CM Punk, so a big face-off between them before a brawl breaks out between CM Punk and Sting. So we're kind of just going completely off script here. It's supposed to be Jeff Hardy v CM Punk, but now they're brawling around ringside. Eventually, CM Punk is able to get to the timekeeper's desk and hit Sting with the Impact World Championship. He's continually showed disrespect to that title, using it more as a weapon and a prop, but that's just CM Punk for you. Jeff Hardy then comes out after him. They're brawling, and what we want to do here is set up for a huge spot. So I want there to be a ladder, either tables on the ground next to the stage, or when they kind of do that thing where they have a black sheet covering something that's like a nice landing for the wrestlers or whatever. The idea is that Jeff is going to go to the ladder and hit a swanton bomb to CM Punk. Both men down for a fair while, so a lot happening in this short match, but of course it's going to break down fairly soon. Then we follow it up with Jeff Hardy managing to get up. He's in just as bad of a state as CM Punk, arguably, but he's managing to drag himself back to the ring. Medical professionals look at CM Punk, and it is eventually decided by the referee and the medics that CM Punk cannot continue. So it's a referee stoppage on the outside of the steel cage in what is supposed to be a steel cage pay-per-view main event. So that's why I think it's a screwy finish, arguably, but really Jeff Hardy just did something so brutal to CM Punk that he couldn't continue. Punk taking a pinfall defeat after losing his championship last month. I just didn't want that to happen, basically. Protecting CM Punk in a sense, but at the same time, it's not a situation where there can be any excuses. After the match, we get CM Punk being stretchered out of the building. Jeff Hardy himself, of course, has just been through that brutal spot. He struggles back to his feet and is handed the Impact Wrestling Championship by the referee, while the finish to this match brings with it even more controversy in the ongoing rivalry between these two men. Of course, Sting getting involved, so CM Punk's not going to be happy about that when he eventually comes back to consciousness. The commentators put over that whether fans like how it happened or not, Jeff Hardy is the winner tonight and is still the Impact World Champion. So we're even trying to get the commentators to do some sort of damage limitation here. While Jeff Hardy can barely stand in the ring, the show's sign-off by Mike Tenay, Maranello and Taz is cut short as Paul Heyman comes out from the back. Smirking, he turns to the side and is joined by his guest, better late than never, Brock Lesnar, making his return to professional wrestling after many, many years. The former UFC heavyweight champion marches down to the ring, flanked by Paul Heyman. Jeff Hardy makes a futile attempt at fighting off the returning former WWE champion, and he is quickly manhandled and laid out with an F5. I'm putting that in quotation marks because I'm going to have to basically rename that move. Standing then with his boot on the chest of our Impact World Champion, Brock Lesnar stands tall in the shocking conclusion of Impact Wrestling Lockdown 2012. So plans certainly did change here tonight. Originally, he had in mind looking at Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe, but actually as Jeff Hardy came out of lockdown with the Impact Wrestling World Championship, he goes out of it on his back with Brock Lesnar stood tall. Now I'm hoping that people think that that makes the finish of the main event worth it. I think we've had a really, really good show overall. I'm very, very happy with how everything has come out. But, of course, the talking point has to be the biggest signing in the history of Impact Wrestling. I can't remember who put in the great performances, but I'm going to praise CM Punk because despite me keeping him strong, he was still not too happy about the finish of that match. Of course, we've got to praise Kurt Angle. I might give Kurt Angle a hug, actually. His first match, it's a little bit emotional, isn't it? After 6 months out on the sidelines. And we'll also compliment Samoa Joe for his... No, actually, Bryan Danielson, I think, was a little bit better. We'll give those three the praise. Guys who've been praised time and time again. But we are very, very happy with how that show's come out and even more happy with where it leaves us as a company. Brock Lesnar's arrival, one of the three big pillars of this save. It was Bryan Danielson coming in 2010. It was CM Punk coming in 2011, and it is now Brock Lesnar in 2012. One of those big moments in the 2.5 year history of this save. Of course, we've had the New Age's arrival, we've had the Ring of Honor invasion, but in terms of individuals coming to the company, there are no bigger signings. 3 boxes ticked off from something that I had in mind many years ago before TEW 2020 came out. We're now, of course, well into the cycle of TEW 9, but thank you to anybody who is still watching this, and I hope drawn out nature of this series has been worth it. Of course, in reality, he went back to WWE, but in this scenario, the pull of Paul Heyman was enough to bring him to Impact Wrestling, the 7th best match that we've had so far there. It is the most attended show that we have done so far. Pay-per-view buys, clearly we were doing much better on pay-per-view buys back in the day, but Brock Lesnar has arrived in Impact Wrestling, overshadowing what was a really good show overall. I mean, we've got title changes, we've got so much to come off this, and now we are in those 2 months, that official build to Slammiversary, and you can see where the end goal is in this save. We're coming to it very shortly, so I'm hoping that people will be happy to continue to join me on that journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.